The evidence suggests that what you really want to do to grow your company and to have a healthy business is to have a lot of people who like you a little bit. And the way you grow isn't by getting people to go from buying one bottle of WD-40 a year to buying 3 bottles of WD-40 a year, because really, how the heck's that going to happen? But to get more people who buy you.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives? Because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching or group training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear from communication experts from around the world to offer you insights and ideas to improve how you communicate in business. My guest today is Ethan Decker. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Ethan. 1, he is a brand strategist and marketing expert who has spent 20 years doing award-winning brand strategy, advertising, and market research for some of the world's biggest brands. 2, he has conducted in-home interviews in Japan, in Tokyo, to gather his statistics and data that he bases his decisions on. And 3, here's an interesting fact about him. He wrote a children's musical. And maybe if we had time, we could get him to play a little bit of that for us or sing it for us today. Ethan Decker, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me on.
Delighted to be talking with you. And yes, another interesting fact that is relevant is that you have a PhD in biology, ecology.
Yes, this is true. What that has to do with marketing is a conversation for a beer, but yes.
I look forward to having that conversation and that beer. I'm sure it'll be a long conversation. So I'm curious, do you, as a scientist, you obviously look at the world differently than a non-scientist. Do you see science in marketing?
100%. And actually, that was the interesting angle I had in my career in advertising, was coming in as someone who was doing science. I asked naively, I guess, what's the science of advertising? What's the science of marketing? And mostly I got laughed at. People would say, oh, it's all creativity and instinct and connecting with culture. It's an art. It's not a science. But apparently I get the last laugh because there is a science to advertising, a science to marketing, a science to how brands grow, and a science to how shoppers shop. It's just not widely known. So on the one hand, I do a lot of work just to help people understand what the science is. I simplify the concepts. I make them useful and easy. But then it also does not negate the fact that there is art. There is artistry to marketing and advertising. One of the great metaphors is, you need physics. You need to understand physics and engineering to make a plane fly. But the physics and engineering don't tell you how to make people gasp in awe as it goes by.
That is worth remembering and repeating. And you're right. Yes, when we see those planes take off at an airport, or we watch them at an air show, or if we're in the plane itself and we gasp when we fly over something that's worth gasping at.
Something majestic. Yeah. And so it's been fun because I do have a history in the creative world. As you said, I used to be in musicals, and I wrote a children's musical long ago that was professionally produced. But having also been a scientist, I really do look for the universal patterns, the things which are law-like behaviors that we can then use as principles instead of have to rediscover all the time, as if we have to go around measuring whether gravity still works every time we go to a new state or a new country. You don't have to measure whether gravity works. And the beauty of the science of branding, which is a little different than all the big data stuff people are talking about, but the science of branding and marketing gives you those principles that then allows you to go into a new situation, and you don't have to remeasure everything because the principle will still apply because it's a universal law.
And that's the beauty of when we learn and understand the principle, we don't have to prove it again because that's what principles are. Principles are those guidelines, those rules. I'm curious, what are some of the dominant principles when it comes to marketing?
So, one of the dominant principles that seems to be not supported by the science is that your ultimate goal is to create brand loyalty above and beyond other brands. And loyalty is a really, really squishy concept. I don't like it very much. It's pretty sloppy, in fact, because it confuses how you behave and how you feel. The same thing with brand love, right? But you might regularly purchase WD-40 or Castrol motor oil, but you might not have any, quote, loyalty or love for the brand. And if it goes away, you'd switch instantly. But you're a very regular and maybe even heavy buyer. So the concepts of love and loyalty, just like they are amongst humans, are really sloppy and squishy concepts. And the evidence seems to point kind of counter to looking for that in your brand. The evidence suggests that what you really want to do to grow your company and to have a healthy business is to have a lot of people who like you a little bit. And the way you grow isn't by getting people to go from buying one bottle of WD-40 a year to buying 3 bottles of WD-40 a year, because really, how the heck's that going to happen? But to get more people who buy you. And some of them are avid cyclists, so they do use up a lot of WD-40, and some of them aren't. And once in a while, they use it to, make the hinges stop squeaking in their bedroom. So the real science of brand growth suggests that this fantasy we have about brand love and brand loyalty is a little misguided, and that the real secret is in growing the number of customers you have. And naturally, you will have more customers who tend to buy you more often as well. So in other words, loyalty or frequency, if we're more precise, frequency of purchase is highly correlated with the number of customers you have. So they're linked. They move in lockstep. So you can't really just increase your brand by getting people to buy you more often and get them to buy more WD-40. You have to get new customers if you also want to get customers who buy you a lot.
There's only so much that people can use of a particular product. So I suppose it's irrelevant how loyal they are or how much they love you. They only can use so much of most products anyways.
Yeah. And there's very little marketers can do to increase purchase or usage frequency. It's very hard, let's say. I mean, you can do something once in a while to increase frequency and usage. Like, do you ever notice on your, let's say your toothbrush, some of the bristles are blue, and then as you use it, those bristles get paler and paler, and until they become white? That's an indicator that tells you it's time to change your toothbrush. And that does tend to help people buy more toothbrushes. But it's really hard otherwise to get someone to go from buying 5 jars of mayonnaise to buying 7 jars of mayonnaise. Like, they're going to eat the mayonnaise they want. And so your best bet is to get more customers in, and some of those will buy you a little bit, and some of those will buy you a lot. But it's a little counterintuitive because there's the fantasy that you can have a passionate fan base that's small but loyal, and you can have a great company. Like, even Harley Davidson doesn't have Harley Davidson's level of mythic loyalty. Most people who own Harley Davidson own one Harley Davidson. And if they own more than one motorcycle, chances are they own 2 different brands. So it's a pernicious and pervasive fantasy that really flies in the face of the science of how brands really grow.
And I'm reminded of 2 thoughts there while you were talking. One, I am a motorcyclist and I don't have a Harley. However, someday I would like to have a Harley just for the sake of having had a Harley. And it's not so much that I want the Harley. I want to be able to say I had a Harley. That's all.
Yeah. We're weird creatures that way, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. And I'm also reminded of a friend of mine. Now, you could say that they are loyal to where they buy their pizza. And he's told me how well they've been treated, and they get 1 pizza a week. That's it. One pizza a week. They're not
Yep.
getting more just because they like where they're getting it from. So they're going to get one pizza a week for as long as they want a pizza, but no more. It's like
Sure.
Friday night's pizza night. That's it.
And
Can't
you
have-
know what? He's a fabulous customer. If you can have a customer that's a regular buyer that comes in once a week and gets your pizza, that's amazing. And you're right. We are very much creatures of habit, except when we're not, right? Circumstances change, or we want to try a new place, or we're in the mood for something different, or our life changes. We get married or divorced, and suddenly our purchases or the brands we choose change because the people we live with want different brands. And almost all of those things happen outside of the control of a brand. And that's a bit of the science. Again, the science shows that most of the changes in people's purchases happen because of reasons outside of a brand's control.
So if it's not the brand, what should we understand about customers' behavior, about how they behave? What influences their behavior if it's not loyalty?
Well, there's a triplet that someone taught me recently. We do what the herd does. So whatever the herd is doing, if everyone's buying a Harley, you want to buy a Harley too. If everyone in your family drinks Coca-Cola and not Pepsi, you tend to drink Coca-Cola too. It's herd behavior. And if you want to do something new that you've never done before, like let's say you want to get into fly fishing, then you're going to look around and see what fly fishing equipment people buy, and you're going to just buy what they buy because that's an easy shorthand for making that decision. So herd behavior is the big first one. That's how we learn things and make brand choices. The second one is habit. Just like you said, your friend who buys the same pizza every week from the same restaurant every week, it's good. It's good enough. It might be fabulous. It might be fine, but habit is an incredibly powerful force in our brand choices. And then the third one is hassle. And if things are a hassle, we tend to avoid them. So let's say your buddy who buys that pizza has heard there's a better pizza shop, but it's either across town or they only take cash or they don't do delivery and it's just a hassle to get there and get that pizza. Then chances are good he's just going to keep his regular place and go there and get his pizzas. So herd, habit, and hassle are three really driving factors about how people buy things and how they choose their brands. And if you understand those and understand how to work within those rules, within those laws, you have a much better chance of having a successful brand and some growth.
Which of the three is most powerful?
Oh, man. They show up in very different circumstances in very different ways at any given moment. If you're out on a date, then, if something's a little bit of a hassle, maybe that makes it fun and interesting. And you certainly might not want to do something that's habitual. You want to do something that's new and go to the new bar or speakeasy that you happen to have heard about. So it's very, very contextual, but all three of them are very strong forces. And you have to know how to work within them. For instance, there are things a brand can do to position itself well. But like we said, it might be hard to actually force the behavior of change. But for instance, when it comes to hassle, have you ever bought anything online and had to enter in your whole address and all the drop-down menus are a pain in the butt, and then you have to put in which country you're in? Well, it turns out there are already programs out there that can preload your location, sometimes just by knowing where you're dialing in from, and then they can pre-fill your address as you're typing it out. So you type out 2330 Broad, and it continues at 2330 Broadway, Toronto, Canada. And it will do that for you. And it creates less of a hassle. And therefore, it's a lot easier to buy from that company online. If the checkout procedure is a pain in the butt and a hassle, people will just leave the cart full and close the tab and move on to a place where it's less of a hassle. And you know who does a great job of that is Amazon. They make sure they try and remove every single hassle they can from your purchase. So you can get down to literally a one-click purchase. Buy it now. And you click the button and you're done.
And I encounter the hassle when I go to the grocery store and I go to the self-checkout, and every store has a different process for a different machine, and even the same store, do you go left to right or right to left?
Bingo.
Which counter do you put it on? And
Yeah.
why is it complaining that I put my reusable bag on there?
Yeah. If it's a hassle, it's going to annoy you, and you're going to be less likely to go there or go there again, or you'll just abandon your cart physically. And I've seen that plenty. I've done a lot of work at retail and grocery, and you actually see abandoned shopping carts in a grocery store if it's too much of a hassle to check out.
So when I look at those three, herd, habit, hassle, for some reason, hassle strikes me as possibly the biggest motivator, because it's a negative, and sometimes it doesn't take much of a negative to be enough to turn us off.
Yep. It's true. It's true. It can just be a little thing. Like, most people shop at the grocery store closest to their home. It's not the best. It might not have the best prices. It might not have the best produce, but it's the one that just happens to be closest. And so the default setting is just do what's easiest. Now, this also applies to the one about habit, because the default is just do the thing you did last time. It's the easiest. The way that brands often mess this up, and frankly, people too, when they're trying to communicate, is they keep switching up their message. And this certainly gets to what you talk about when you coach people on effective communication. If you keep switching up your message, keep switching up your metaphors, keep switching up how you communicate to folks, then nothing sticks. Nothing becomes familiar. Nothing becomes easy to remember. You've probably heard of the brand Bounty. Do you remember their slogan, their tagline?
I don't remember.
Bounty is the quicker
picker upper.
Boom. There you go.
Yeah.
It's the quicker picker upper. And they, at some point, tried to get away from that. They thought it was too old and dated, but it's got 30 or 40 or 50 years. I don't even know when it was founded or started. 50 years of equity in that phrase. And it's easy to remember. Quicker picker upper. It's cute. It's sticky. And that's great when shoppers tend to be habitual and tend to avoid hassles. They want to be lazy about their decisions. So if you're in marketing, the last thing you want to do is swap out a good ad campaign for a new one just because it's new. And some of the best ad campaigns, the most effective, the ones that they get more and more influence out of every dollar they spend, are the ones that are the longest lived, like Aflac's Duck or the Geico Gecko, right? These are long-standing campaigns that now it's so familiar. The Geico Gecko feels like it's just part of culture and part of the wallpaper. And every time you see a Gecko ad, you know exactly what brand it's for. If they were to change it up, you'd have to figure out what brand they're advertising.
And Ethan, I see in what you just said there, I see the lesson of following the science first instead of the art.
Yeah. Well, the science gives you the framework, right? The science gives you the foundations. It's no use coming up with a gorgeous building that is scientifically impossible to build. Or you can do that, but then you have to figure out how to do the science to make it work. So Frank Gehry and his famous titanium-clad Bilbao Museum and other museums, the beautiful undulating titanium cladding around all the thing, they had to figure out the physics to make that work. And really what they did was they just built a normal building inside of it and then stuck the stuff on top to make it look beautiful, as opposed to try and make the actual walls out of titanium. But it does help to know the science first, because then you're not trying to push water uphill. You're not trying to build a plane out of the heaviest substance, out of lead, right? It's good to know you should use aluminum and carbon fiber and really lightweight things and not lead when you're building a plane.
And I believe that too many marketers think that it's about being artistic, and they pitch an artistic approach to their clients and ignore the science.
They do. Or you see one or the other. You see people who are enamored with science and think everything can be boiled down to science, and you just follow the best practices. But often they don't know the actual science. They're just doing best practices, which is really just convention. And then you have a lot of folks who believe it's all just art and that there is no science to it. Now, again, there is a lot of artistry to it. There's a reason that great ads are rare. Most ads are mediocre. I like to joke that 90% of all ads are below average. But it's true in the sense of effectiveness. 90% of ads are fairly ineffective. And a piece of the puzzle is actually the artistry. To make a good ad takes talent. It takes skill. It takes artistry. To build a good brand, it does take understanding the laws, but it also takes artistry. So the real risk, as you said, George, is when someone has no clue about the science and doesn't respect the notion that there's a science to this as well.
Ethan, I'm wondering if there's an ad, a favorite ad that you could tell us about that exemplifies what you're saying.
Sure. One of them that's great, it's a small ad for Kmart. And they wanted to showcase that they can ship directly from the store to your home, especially for larger items, but for anything really. So you didn't have to carry it home or schlep it to work or do anything like that. You could be at the store, do your shopping, and then they would ship it directly to your house. And the ad starts with a guy in the middle of the store saying, "Ship my pants? Ship my pants?" And you already are laughing, right? And there's a lot of artistry to this ad. So don't get me wrong. It's beautifully written. There's a lot of artistry to the casting and the performances and the filming. But the fundamental rules are do things that grab some attention, that are surprising, and that are also distinctive, that you wouldn't mistake for another ad. And at that point, no one else was making that kind of double entendre. And another one is being sticky. Sticky is a big, all-encompassing word that I use a lot for the kind of ads that seem to work the best. They're sticky, right? They grab your attention, they grab at your memory, they stick in your brain for a while. And ship my pants? You mean I just ship my drawers? Is another line from the ad. I can ship my shoes? And there's a little kid who's like, "Dad, I want to ship these." So it's very funny. It's very sticky. And then people remember it. Because again, half the battle is no one's thinking about your brand. No one remembers your brand. No one cares about Kmart on a day-to-day basis. They care about their kids' appointments or their eye doctor or where their car keys are. So creating a sticky ad is very important, and also making it linked to your brand. Those are two really key rules of science. And then there's a lot of artistry that goes on top of it. But if you look up the "Ship My Pants" ad for Kmart, it's cute. It's funny. It worked. It worked quite well. Actually, it worked so well that it got parodied. People started doing versions of it. And then I saw a church somewhere who was having some challenge with scheduling because they had so many people wanting to come to the Sunday service. It was just bursting at the seams. So they said they wanted people to come to their Saturday or Friday service. And they said, "Ship my seat? I can ship my seat?" And they did a parody of it. And this is a church.
And it's a church.
They wouldn't want to do a joke about shipping your drawers. But in fact, they loved it as well.
And that's where someone had the vision to see this is something we can leverage. This is something we can use because it's sticky, because it gets noticed.
Yep. It's sticky. It gets noticed. It gets remembered. And then the real lightning in a bottle, which again does require some artistry, is when it gets remembered so much it kind of gets picked up in culture. You might remember the old Wendy's ad about "Where's the beef?" Right? That was sticky, and that got stuck in culture and in people's minds.
Humor, is that an important element?
Absolutely. Humor is a great tool to use. I think that Humor can be dicey, humor can be risky, and there will always be someone in a focus group who says, it's not appropriate for Kmart to be joking about shipping your drawers. And someone will be, upset or offended or whatnot. But most of the humor in advertising can be quite effective, especially if it doesn't punch down, I like to say, which is making fun of people who are lower power, lower status, things like that, right? So you don't want to have an ad which is just making fun of women because they're women. That's not great humor. So you gotta be funny. You gotta actually be talented enough to write something that's actually funny. But humor is a great tool, and a lot of brands could use it. In fact, George, I mentioned Geico earlier. You'd think 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before any of these insurance mascots came around, you'd think that insurance was the most serious category in the world. Because what is insurance about? Damages, accidents, injuries, dismemberment, death, losing a loved one, losing your income, having a storm rip your home apart. Insurance is not there for anything fun, really. So it's a serious, serious topic. And yet, the revolution in the past 25 years in the insurance advertising world has been all about humor. The Aflac duck, the Geico gecko, Liberty Mutual, and the emu, on and on and on. All these ads which use humor to get people to remember which insurance brand is which.
And to me, the insurance industry's use of humor, I believe, is their way of trying to make it appear more human.
That's a huge piece of it, for sure. But I think it goes even to a deeper, simpler level, which is to be remembered at all, to be noticed at all. Before the first one, and I don't know if it was the Geico gecko or the Aflac duck or compare the meerkat in England. There's a campaign about a meerkat who represents a brand. But they were all very somber ads about families losing loved ones or having their homes destroyed. And the problem was no one remembered the ads. No one remembered who it was for. The brand linkage, which is to say, how well did people remember the brand of the ad? Brand linkage in advertising was something around 7%, which means 93% of people couldn't remember which brand a given ad was for, even the very next day. So one of the huge victories of all of this humor and understanding the power of humor to be sticky is that now the Geico ad comes on and 97% of people know instantly it's a Geico ad. There's no confusing it with Progressive or State Farm.
Is that all part of branding?
Absolutely. I like to say that there are two ways we talk about branding. Branding is also one of those words like loyalty that's a little mushy. Your little b brand, which is your logo and your colors. In my case, it's orange, right? I do a lot of orange and white, and then my logo is a frog with antlers. And Starbucks, if you think of the Starbucks brand, you might think of that mermaid siren princess thing. And it's green and white, and then maybe some earth tones because they like to use wood in their stores. I call that little b brand. And that matters tremendously because, again, it makes it easy for people to remember which brand they bought. Sometimes you don't remember which motor oil or toilet paper you actually bought. Is it the one with the bears or the one with the angels? But the other thing is there's what I call big B brand. And big B brand is your whole company, your business, and your reputation all wrapped up in one. So when you think about the Starbucks brand, you might think about Howard Schultz, the founder and owner. Well, not quite founder, but anyway, one of the CEOs. You might think about the baristas you know. You might think about the flavor of the coffee and the actual coffee packaging. You might think about the aisle in the grocery store where they have that Starbucks logo sticking out so you can identify where the coffee section is. There are all these things that make up the Starbucks brand in a big B sense. And you need to focus on both. You need to care for both and tend to both because both matter when it comes to trying to sell your stuff to consumers with little brains that can't find their car keys.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy. Appreciate that. Ethan, for those who'd like to know more about you and what you do, they can find your website, which I believe is appliedbrandscience.com.
Correct.
What will they find that will be helpful to them?
So at the website, I have information about the services I offer. I do two big things. I help fix your brand if you want me to work on the brand with you, or I train your marketing team the laws and levers of brand science so that you can then build your brand in a way that's consistent with how the universe actually works and the fact that water does not flow uphill. So you'll find information about my services. You'll also find all my writing. I write every week, at least once or twice a week. So there's a blog there with a lot of information as well. And then there are small projects like if you want a brand tune-up, you can bring your brand into the shop, so to speak. I'll change the oil. We'll talk about what that weird noise is in your brand that you might want to get checked out next year, and then other bigger fixes that you might need later. So there's all kind of information like that on the website. I'm also on LinkedIn quite a lot. So if you want to have a conversation, join the group over on LinkedIn. I post there almost every day. And then a lot of folks like to chime in, and the conversations are just fabulous. And that's at EH Decker. That's the handle at LinkedIn.
And you can find those links in the description below. Ethan, as we prepare to wrap up, imagine that you sit down with a business owner in a competitive industry, and which one isn't?
Right.
In a very competitive market, what would be the first 1, 2, or 3 questions that you would ask them for you to get a read of where they are in building their brand?
Question 1, I almost always start with is, what's your ambition? And then question 2, which is a nice follow-up, is how close or far are you from your ambition? Are you where you want to be? Are things going well or not well? Are you close to achieving your goals or not close at all to achieving your goals? And those are 2 big questions. And then the third question, which is really all the questions, is, well, tell me what seems to be working and what seems to be not working. And that helps me diagnose the situation so that I can help them achieve their ambition.
Good questions to think about. My guest today is Ethan Decker, reminding you that maybe it's time to ship your pants.
Well said.
If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.